Tashi, I wanted to say hi. I don't know how to even show myself now. I wanted to make this a half a screen and I'm not sure how to do that. How you doing?
This and off this. Hi, Naveed.
Yes, how are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, because it's telling me that I'm getting a message that my microphone is off, but I guess the message is wrong. So good. Can you see?
Okay.
Can you see me?
I could see you and I could hear you now. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Excellent. Baruch Hashem.
Good, good, good. I'm excited about the shiur.
I'm so enjoying Batya in the shiur. I got to see her this morning.
She likes your classes. She says you're a great teacher.
She's great.
So your teacher there, that's sort of it's the first time she's learning Gemara. So that's like a beginner's class.
So it's supposed to be the English class, and it is defined sort of as the beginner's class. But the truth of the matter is, so quickly, it's more like in the very beginning, we do the intro to explain and just give a lot of backgrounds on Gemara in general. But very quickly, everybody catches on, understands Gemara very well, and you can't tell anymore between the difference between a beginner and an advanced and intermediate.
Really, that's great.
Amazing.
That's so great. Yeah, and me, I'm struggling for years to get anywhere. In Yiddish, there's an expression, an alter cup, an old head.
Oh, it's difficult. It is difficult.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Abigail Handel. My daughter Ayelet Handel is in the program. She's doing. Last year she was Shana, Shana Ba'aretz, and this year she's Shir Hemshach.
Yeah, we love her. So nice. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, we love her too.
We already have something in common. That's
Absolutely.
Great. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So excited. So nice to see parents and grandparents of faces that I see in the midrashat. So nice.
Yeah, I understand there's a little bit of a balagan there right now.
Right now, there's a bit of a balagan, not just there. Unfortunately, in Israel in general, things are going into lockdown. They already were in like a sort of lockdown, but not enough. And now it sounds like there's going to be a real lockdown with all the kids and everything. So yeah, the midrasha is also within that balagan.
Hi, yeah, Abigail and Sipora. We're big fans of Ayelet.
Hey, oh.
Tremendous. She's so learned, so sweet.
She really is. Did that second girl test positive?
Yeah.
She tested positive?
Who, Hadassah?
The girl in
the French girl
capsule.
We're being recorded, guys.
Ayelet's capsule, yeah. It just came back positive.
Oh my God. So they're all in quarantine now.
Yeah.
As long as
as of half an hour ago.
As long as Ayel's not in quarantine all by herself.
Not at all.
Okay,
no. Wow, sorry to hear, but we're recording. Yeah, okay.
It's okay, it's not going up.
Nobody said anything. That's really a problem, right?
Lucy, how you doing?
Okay,
I'm good.
Run now. I'll be right back.
How you doing? So nice to see you.
And to see you.
Emily.
And to see all your books too. That's how we know we're in your house, like that we see your house, because all the books and yeah.
True. Okay, so I got to welcome everyone this morning. which I was excited about, but I'll do it again, and I'll do another little welcoming, a mini welcome. Just for those who haven't heard this this morning, because for some people I think this is now morning. So I just want to welcome to Nishmat. I see a lot of faces who already recognize Nishmat, which is nice. So I'm Navid Sadiq. I'm directing the Zoom program, and a Gemara teacher and Halakha teacher in Nishmat. And I just want to invite in general to Nishmat, to the Ginny Schottenstein Center for Advanced Torah Study for Women. And this winter seminar is part of the Alisa Flato program that we have in Nishmat. And all the Torah learning that we're doing is in the memory of Rav Henkin. So I'm not going to repeat myself too much today, like I did this morning. Just wanted to welcome everybody and say that stay tuned for two other people after me. Rav Brovsky, who's going to talk about the Torah and mitzvahs, if it's just for Jewish people or for everyone. And after him, Rosh Yeshiva of Har Zion, Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, who's going to be talking about equality and exclusivity in the monetary relationships between Jews and Gentiles. So that's what we have in this session. And I'm so excited to be here and to... Okay, I also want to say that this is a Beit Midrash. Okay, that's why I have the books in the back. It was just, they're not really have anything inside. I just put them in the back so we look like we're in a Beit Midrash. No, I'm just kidding, they're actual books. But I want to explain that we're actually in a Beit Midrash, which means that you have to be active participants in this. And please feel free to ask questions and to unmute yourselves and to talk and make sure that, this becomes a more of a Torah discussion, less than just a class. Okay? Sounds good. All right, so I'm gonna start with sharing. I wish I knew how to do like very, very back-to-back sharing and just giving a half a screen so I could see better, but I don't really know how to do that. So I'm gonna share with what I have on my screen for now, which is similar to the sources that everybody had out. I'm going to make them a little bit bigger so that anybody who's using a smaller screen could still hopefully see this. Okay? So in Hebrew, we call this the Tigum Shiv'im, and we're basically asking the Torah being translated. It seems like it's an amazing thing to get the Torah out there to as many people as possible. But for some reason, Chazal didn't see it in such a good light, right? When the Torah was translated, and it seems like it was one of those very, very hard days for Am Yisrael. And I'll just read first briefly the way Chazal explained this story. So it's said a few times. The first, no, I shouldn't say the first time. One of the times it says here in Masechet Megillah, it gives a story of Tamai HaMelech, Detanya Maaseh Betamai HaMelech, Shekines Shivim V'Shtayim Zkenim. Okay, he brought 72 elders, and he Chnisotam B'Shivim V'Shtayim Batim, right? He puts them in 72 different rooms. Everybody's in their own room. V'lo Gila Lehem Al Ma Kinsam, right? He doesn't tell them why he's bringing them. And then he says to them, Nichnas etzel kol echad v'echad, and he says, Kitvu li Torat Moshe Rabchem. Okay, translate, write down in Greek, write down the Torah that you guys have. And it was basically miraculous. Hashem, gave each one the understanding in order to write this down, each in a way that they were all actually connected and they were all very similar to one another. From the story here in the Bavli, it just tells you the story playing out. It doesn't tell you right now something that was terrible about it. In two other places we have that it talks about it, it says it in a very, very negative way. One is in Masechet Sofrim, which is part of the Masechtot Ktanot. As opposed to the Bavli, we have the Masechtot Ktanot are later on. And in Masechet Sofrim, it says, the first thing it talks about is that we shouldn't be reading from a regular Sefer Torah if it's written in different languages. But then it tells us the story in the second line. Maaseh b'chamisha zkenim. Okay, so the story is a little bit different because there are actually two versions of the story that both come up in Masechet Sofrim. And it says there was once these 5 different elders shekatvu leTalmai hamelech et haTorah Yevanit, that wrote for Talmai hamelech, for this king. They wrote the Torah in Greek. Vaya oto hayom kashe Yisrael kiyom shnasa bo ha'egel. It was hard. This day was so hard for Am Yisrael, like chet ha'egel, like the golden calf. And in Masechet Sofrim it also tells us why. Shelo hayta haTorah yichola litargem kol tzorka. Because the Torah is not really able to be translated the way it really should be, right? You can't. It has depth that it can't be completely translated. The other version of this story I brought in the Shulchan Aruch because that was where I found it. The truth of the matter, it's really taken from part of Megillat Tanit. Brought in the day that some people fast as like an extra fast. Most of us today don't take on all these extra fasts, but it all came because it was very close to that. It was the 8th of Tevet, and it was very close to the 10th of Tevet, and everybody's fasting on the 10th of Tevet. It was one of those things that we say, you know, we added on to the 10th of Tevet, one of those things that we're fasting for. Similar to the 9th of Av, right? We're fasting on Tisha B'Av, and the truth of the matter is, which of the Patei Mikdash, which Beit Mikdash was destroyed on Tisha B'Av? Which temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av? Does anybody know? So the truth of the matter is, it wasn't the first and it wasn't the second, and we only had 2. So according to Chazal, it happened on the 8th of Av, or it happened on the 10th of Av. But we fast on Tisha B'Av because it was sort of a middle ground between both. So that's why we fast on Tisha B'Av. But it's hard to fast every day. You know, every day has a sort of a different tragedy, unfortunately, sometimes. And on the 8th of Tevet, the Torah was written down into Greek. And that's one of the reasons for Asara b'Tevet, on the 10th of Tevet, that we're fasting. Chazal say that we talk about how one of those days is also because of Asara b'Tevet. Okay, so let me stop sharing for 1 second just to ask. I understand that when something is translated into another language, something is always going to be lost in translation. There's no question, right? And of course, when you're talking about the depth of the Torah and just the wording used that you can understand in so many different ways, to then translate is always going to be a little bit difficult. But like everything in life, we have to weigh advantages and disadvantages. So that's a very big disadvantage, obviously. But what is the advantages? What are the advantages, essentially, of having the Torah translated?
Makes it more accessible.
It makes it more accessible for a lot of people to learn. Meaning, obviously, not everybody knows Hebrew, so just more people could learn the Torah. And what we want to do is trying to get the word out there, even though I understand that it's difficult because there's a certain amount of depth that not everyone's going to understand. It still makes it more accessible to other people. What else is maybe an advantage or maybe a disadvantage that we could think about?
Well, I'm just thinking that the seminar after you is a mitzvah for Jews only.
Okay, so basically what we're saying is that making it more accessible might be a bad thing, meaning we don't we don't want to open this up to everybody. Am I doing justice to what you were saying, Abigail?
Well, I'm just saying, right, if you're going to say, right, which I don't know what they're going to say, if you're going to say that Torah and mitzvot are only for the Jews, then better it not be translated. If you're going to say Torah and mitzvot are not only for the Jews, then better it is translated.
Okay, so if we want to try to be as warm and welcoming to everybody in the world, it would make sense to translate this. But maybe the problem of translating is that we're opening this up for, just like we're making it more accessible, we're opening this up for non-Jews also. And possibly we don't want to do that. Maybe, if we don't want to do that, which is still a question, meaning if we have this great Torah and we have all these mitzvot that are supposed to lead us in the right direction and show us the light in general of how we're supposed to be just directing our lives, it's questionable why we don't want to share this with other people.
Maybe.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, sorry. If we share it with other people, they won't use it the same way we do, and then they may use it in a way that you don't want them to use it. So sharing also has its, like, you don't know what's going to happen next.
How is someone going to misuse it if it's translated?
You could be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're afraid that people are going to translate.
But that could be with Jews and with non-Jews.
Right. But if people have access to the translation and not to the original text, and you only rely on translation, if there is a mistake in translation, you won't notice it, and you will use it as it is because you believe that it's translated truthfully, and then you can make a mistake, and from that you can get in trouble.
I totally agree with you. Sorry.
What? So I'm thinking there's also an issue that I worked on a project years ago, translation of Talmud, and you know, the truth is that anytime you translate from any language to any other language, it's really a commentary at the same time. It's not just like the words, it's a commentary. So you've got a couple of problems if you're translating the Torah. First of all, you are narrowing it to one interpretation and saying this is the one interpretation, which is the correct interpretation because everyone agreed on it. When you're supposed to look at, my understanding, you're supposed to look at the Torah through all these different gates, right? All these different gates, all these different ways of looking at it. And the second is then you're undermining the oral law because you're saying, oh, it's right all here in the written law. Like this is it. This is the one way to see it.
I hear you. Okay, excellent. Pesha, do you want to say something before I go on?
No, I just actually, I don't remember the name of the person who came before me, made the same point I was going to make, but in Italian, there's an expression which I can't remember, which basically translates to the translation is a traitor, because for the reason that she just mentioned, you're focusing in on one translation, but there are translators who have dealt with that, like Robert Alter's new translation of the Bible has a commentary, but it's not a commentary on the Tochen, it's a commentary on the translation, why he picked the word he did, what other words he could pick. So to me, that is not the main problem. I don't know if that's the problem that Chazal had in mind.
Okay, so I definitely agree that there's definitely problems in translation, but I do think that Nicole, the name that what you were saying to begin with, and I think that there's a bunch of other advantages also that we should just take into account, right? We were talking about people maybe misusing it, misinterpreting it, leaving it to one understanding. And first of all, we might be able to do this in different ways, right? We might be able to translate it in a way like most are done now. We have like the bold letters that is a literal translation, and then the interpretation may be in different kind of letters, or have on the bottom, you know, one of those, all those different explanations of the different translations we're having. And the truth is, if we're so exclusive and not showing anybody anything about this, we're also, how is anyone ever supposed to get to this? Meaning, if we start with the translation, maybe the more people open up to it and the more people learn it, you know, I'm being recorded, but I will say that a long time ago when women didn't learn any Gemara, it was like the scary thing was what's going to happen when they start learning Gemara? What if they misunderstand it and take it in the wrong direction? But what about, you know, if you never open up for people to start learning and to get excited about, and then direct them in the right way, you know, that's also very problematic. Like there's a way maybe of doing it, even with translations. Maybe in the beginning, we all need certain translations so until we get to that point where we understand. But we all have to start maybe somewhere. And why wouldn't it be a good start to first translate, to explain, to open it up, and then it will come to us that we, eventually understand better. So there are definitely, I think, advantages to having this opened up to more people. And I will just say, I'm going to share this again. That the whole translating the Torah was really, really not new. Meaning, in general, we know that there was a Metul Gaman, okay, who's literally, we call him a translator, but he was sort of a microphone, because in a lot of different, whenever people were giving, rabbis were giving shurim and classes, he had like this Metul Gaman who would say things and just basically say what the rabbi was saying louder so everybody could hear. But we also had reading the Torah in front of all of Am Yisrael. We had a Metul Gaman, somebody who would stand there and translate it into Aramaic so that everybody could understand it. Okay, meaning I'm talking about for the Jewish people. So we have, for instance, in Masechet Megillah, it says in the Mishnah, Maseh Reuven nikra velo mitargem, Maseh Tamar nikra v'mitargem, Maseh Egel harishon nikra v'mitargem, v'asheni nikra velo mitargem. Okay, v'berkat kohanim David abalo nikraim velo mitargemim. So we have here a list of things that the Mishnah is telling us, but from this we actually know that in general, the Torah was when we went to Torah reading in a shul, everybody heard the Torah reading besides for just the Torah reading. They also heard the translation. It was read not only in Hebrew, but it was also read with a translation. And then the Mishnah says, by the way, there's certain things that we don't translate out loud. Okay. What's interesting is I took this from Sefaria, and here we have the bold is actually the literal translation of the Mishnah. And like Abigail was saying, there's always has to be a certain amount of interpretation and explaining here, and the parts that's not bold are, of course, the interpretation, right? So it says Ma'aser Reuven, which they're just explaining what that was, the Ma'aser Reuven, that Reuven slept with Bilhah, okay, who was essentially his father's wife. So it's read, we're not going to skip over that in the Torah. It's part of the Torah, and we're going to read it out loud. We're just not going to translate it for everybody to understand. Here it says, in order, so for the respect of Reuven, basically. But the truth of the matter is, it's unclear why we're not translating it. It just says that you don't translate that. And then it goes on to say, we have in the Gemara, there's the quota Tosefta, the other parts that, one of the parts in terms of Reuven that it was read out loud but not translated. So even though it says that in the Mishnah, it must have been a time where it wasn't accepted by all the Kehilot. It wasn't so clear that everybody wasn't translating it. And we know that because it gives us this incident that happened. And if this happened everywhere, there was no reason to give us this incident as if this was so unique. And they tell us that once Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel was in Kavul, okay, a certain place, and when they read out loud Ma'aser Reuven, and they got to that pasuk, the rabbi said to the Chazan, just only the end of the pasuk you can translate. Don't translate that pasuk into Aramaic right now. And Chachamim shibchuhu al kach, meaning they said shkoyach, basically. It's good that you didn't. They praised him for it, okay, and they were happy that he did not translate it. The fact that the Gemara is bringing in this as this once happened, okay. After a minute ago, they told us that that's exactly the law that's supposed to happen. Meaning, first of all, the halacha is that you're supposed to say that loud and not translate it. But then the fact that there's this story, which shows that it's unique, is that it wasn't so clear that everybody took this on, and that was the regular practice. It must have been that sometimes that wasn't necessarily the regular practice. But what we definitely know from this also is generally speaking, things were translated. Okay. Generally speaking, people went to shul, they heard the Torah, and there were parts that translated.
Excuse me, Navi?
Yes.
There's the requirement that you read the Torah, Shnayim Mikra v'Echad Targum, so there has to be a Targum to read it, and that wasn't that into Aramaic?
Exactly, 100%.
But when was that? Was that before this Mishnah or after?
So that we have that we're supposed to read Shnai Mikra v'Echad Targum. I think this is after the Mishnah. we do have a Masoret that the Tirgum itself of Tirgum Onkelos was supposed to be very early on. But you're right that there definitely was an Aramaic translation from way early on. Still, though, the like you were saying, Pesha, that people had to read on their own Shnai Mikra V'Achad Tirgum is that you should read on your own the translation so that you understand what's going on. But the fact that it was even read out loud to the congregation with a translation shows that this translation wasn't that bad, right? I mean, meaning, wasn't it, when we first read about the Maset Talmai and about how there was Choshech Shlosha Yamim and it was darkness for 3 days, or this was considered like an Egel HaZahav, like the golden calf, that's nothing like what they were doing, and they were all standing, publicly in congregations and reading the Torah with a translation. That's one thing. Another thing is in Masechet Kiddushin, really Agav, it gives us a story that if somebody says to a woman that Haret Mekudeshet Li, okay, but on a certain condition, meaning he wants to marry her, it says you're betrothed because it's the first stage of marriage, but he's basically saying, I want to marry you on the condition Sha'ani Karyana, okay, basically that I know how to read, but the Karyana, I guess, means not only does he know how to read, but it sounds like he doesn't just know how to read, he knows how to read and understand. He's not just literate, he really understand what he's saying. Okay? So Tanakama says, Kevan shekara shlosha psukim b'beit knesset, since he knows how to read 3 psukim, meaning you have to really read. You can't just, if you know how to read 1 pasuk, that's enough. But if you know how to read 3 psukim straight, harei mekudeshet, that shows that his condition, he passed that condition, and therefore they're really married. But Rabbi Yehuda says, Achi Krabi Telgem. That's not enough that he actually knows how to just read the psukim. When we talk about reading, we mean reading and understand. He has to read it and then translate it. So the Gemara in that asks, Yitelgemi da'ate? What do you mean? He's supposed to translate it on his own with his own understanding? Vahatanya, but we learned in a brayta that Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hamitargem pasuk et surato. Anybody who takes a literal translation, takes a pasuk, and tries to translate with the literal translation, okay, here it says liar, but badai means he doesn't know what he's talking about. Because the minute he translates it literally, he's not really going to get to what the pasuk is talking about. You can't take a literal translation. On the other hand, if you get a very little translation and you don't give any kind of interpretation, it won't even be clear what you're saying. But the minute you try to add to it and you try to explain this, then it's a disgrace to Hashem, because what are you adding on to the Torah? So then the Gemara answers, what does that mean, Tilgum? What does that mean, translation? Tilgum Didan, our translation, meaning a very specific Aramaic translation that we have, and not that anybody could just make up. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Does it matter that it was translated to Greek as opposed to Aramaic, especially because I don't know the timeline, I'm not familiar with the timeline. The Greeks weren't exactly friends of the Jews.
Okay, so that's a really good point. The truth of the matter is, the Romans weren't either. A lot of people weren't in general. But you're making a good point of, does it matter that it was in Greek? Tamai HaMelech was sitting in Egypt, even though we're talking about the translation that was into Greek. And it's also not 100% clear that it was only for the non-Jews, meaning the very beginning part when we see like two different stories here. And in the beginning, before we have the 72 elders that were made, that were told to translate, we have these 5 elders that wrote it, and it seems like they almost decided to do it on their own. And it could be that there's 2 separate things that we're talking about here, because the Masechet Sofrim actually brings both stories as if they're 2 separate stories. One is that these 5 Kenim wrote the Torah into Greek, and it could be that they were writing it for the Jews in Mitzrayim. There were many Jews in Mitzrayim at the time, and it could be that he was really doing it for Jewish people. Not all the Jews spoke Aramaic. Definitely not at that time. We're talking about way earlier on. And then the Gemara says, Kiyom shenasa bo ha'egel. The translation was like the golden calf. Whereas when the Megillat Tani talks about it, and it talks about when the actual Tirgum HaShiv'im of the 70 or 72 elders who were translating it, it gives a different description of what was going on, and it says that it was like choshech ba'olam shlosha yamim, as if there was darkness in for 3 days in the world. So there's a few things I want to talk about. First of all, translations work. Right? I don't know if it's Dafka Aramaic. We definitely know it's for the Jewish people there, but there were translations before and after. But there definitely were translations, and even now I'm reading this. I'm bringing in translations. So it's true that Steinsaltz got a lot of flack for translating the Gemara, and maybe everybody who does that, the first time it becomes a whole big deal if it was the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. But in the end of the day, this idea of in Masechet Megillah of hiding certain information from the crowd doesn't really work so well today, just educationally, I'll say, because this idea that was then as if like you can hold back some information, right? We obviously say the whole Torah in Hebrew, and whoever understood it, great, but a certain amount of it we don't translate because we don't want everybody to understand that Reuven slept with Bilha. Chazal say, by the way, I just want to explain the story. Chazal say that Reuven really did not sleep with Bilha. Okay, he did not sleep with his father's wife, even though straight from the Torah that is what it says. And the way they explain the story, and it definitely both parts if you understand the pshat this way, is that it's very clear that Yaakov was generally living in the tent with Rachel. He loved Rachel. Originally, he wanted to marry Rachel. He wasn't planning on marrying Leah. He was tricked into marrying Leah, but he didn't really want to marry Leah. So he slept in the tent with Rachel, and that's the wife that he loved. It was obviously very hard for Leah, we can all imagine, and the Torah tells us that. It was not easy for her. Every time she has a kid, she's praying that this kid will bring her husband to love her more. And it was very difficult. And then Rachel tragically dies at childbirth with Binyamin. So what's expected to happen after that, as tragic as this is that Yaakov will move into the tent of Leah. But that's not what happens. It seems that he doesn't go into that tent. He goes into the tent with Bilha, who was Shifchat Rachel, and I guess who reminded maybe more of Rachel and was with her kids more. Whatever reason, that's who he went. Reuven is the firstborn of Leah. For him, this was tragic, and he couldn't see his mother being so upset all the time about this. And he felt like, even though this was not his place, but he felt like somebody has to say something to his father, like this is not okay. He did something. According to the Pshat, he actually slept with Bilha, and it seems like the reason he was doing this was almost so that his father wouldn't sleep with Bilha anymore, and he would, have to go into Leah's tent. The way Chazal explained it was he just went into the tent, took his father's bed out of Bilha's tent, and put it into the tent of Leah. Either way, obviously this was not his, his choice. He shouldn't have stuck himself into this situation. But you can also understand what was going on here. It's a difficult pasuk though, and it's a difficult story. And therefore, in order for not everybody to, misunderstand it, it's read without being translated. That's what Chazal say. Today, I feel like that's educationally much harder to do, and probably not the right way of going about things. Trying to give people parts of information and not giving them all the information because we don't know how they're going to deal with it. Generally, I'd say we usually say better to give people the information the right way, all the information, everything they need to know, and to deal with it, and not to try to hide information. Maybe it's just because, we're living in different times. People are literate, people hear things, people are going to end up hearing it. I'll just say as a mother, that's definitely what we're taught to do. Instead of trying to hide information from your kids, you're just supposed to, help them get through whatever they're going to hear anywhere else, and better give them the information and deal with it than try to hide information. So still, it seems like the idea of translation was done beforehand, and I just want to say two things. One is, it's interesting that here we have two different descriptions of the translation. This will talk about a little bit, Abigail, what you were talking about in terms of, was it different in terms of what language or maybe who this was for? It was translated into, meaning twice, and we see that we have two different descriptions of the terrible thing that it was considered. Was it considered like as Egel Zahav? Was it considered like the golden calf? Or was it considered like 3 days of Choshech? What's 3 days of Choshech? Why 3 days of darkness? What does 3 days of darkness have to do with anything? So I'll just explain that the golden calf, I think, seems pretty obvious. The golden calf was really supposed to be sort of worshiping Hashem, but in a very distorted way, because wait, we're asking a question here. Maybe you could speak out loud. Say, I can't read from the chat fast enough.
Okay.
What were you asking?
I was asking, like, if Reuven really would have slept with Bilhah, wouldn't Yaakov have disowned him?
I don't know. I think that the truth of the matter is, either way, the purpose that Reuven was doing this was really a good, like, meaning he meant really well. Generally speaking, I feel like he was a very tragic figure, Reuven. He was an oldest, and he tried so hard. He really did.
Yeah.
And you just see this person who keeps trying, but for some reason it doesn't work out well. And he tried to save Yosef when everybody was like, selling the brother, and he was like, "We're not going to do this. Don't do this." And he's thinking to himself, "We'll stick him in the boar, and I'll take him afterwards, and I'll bring him back to Yaakov." And by the time he gets there, they've already sold him. Like, I feel bad for him. He tries to save the situation, and it just doesn't work out so well. So here too, he really tries to help out his mother, but in a way that wasn't his position to do. I don't know if Yaakov would have disowned him. I'm not really sure. And I think the truth of the matter is, I think what Chazal is telling us is whether or not he did that, his intentions were to try to move the bed away somewhere else. That was his intentions. What he actually physically did, I think, matters less, because the Torah is telling us in like a very explicit way, like, this is so not his place, and that's why it's giving us in like this very, very drastic description of what's going on. And Chazal were telling us the truth of the matter is he meant well. I don't think he disowned him at all. Why are you saying he disowned him, Caroline? Right afterwards it says Bnei Yaakov Shnei Masal.
No, it's just from what we read in last week's parasha. There's when he blesses his son Yaakov, he mentions it, doesn't he? And then he says, "You're not getting." I don't know whether it's the Bechorah or something, like, "You're not getting whatever you were supposed to get as a firstborn."
I hear you. So I don't know if it's called disowned him. If we notice in the pasuk that he says that he slept with Bilhah, it says right afterwards, B'nei Yaakov Shnei Masal, meaning he counts them as this is just his 12 sons. And it seems almost like purposefully that the Torah is telling us that that he didn't disown him, that he was still very much like everybody else. But I think you're right in terms of, I don't know if I would say disowned him. I just think that he tried so hard to take this role of the firstborn and trying to be one of those people who could really unite his brothers and stick up for people, and it didn't work out that way. And that's what Yaakov tells him in the end of the day. I don't know that he was really, he was sort of just saying because of this, in the end of the day. But I don't know if you see the word disown there.
No, I'm reading English. What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Lalta is that you made it not kodesh, meaning the word chulin l'chalel is to disgrace.
Yeah.
That Yitzui Allah is like the bed of your father, basically.
Yeah, no, but I mean, he doesn't say anything nice to Reuven. He just says, "You messed up," and then like he moves on to the other guys who also did. But...
Yeah, that's true. He sometimes he wasn't trying to say that you guys are the best kids in the world. He was just trying to Give them Musar also, which also makes sense. That's definitely his place as a parent also. But again, I'm not going into the facts of what necessarily happened there. I actually think that Chazal very much understand that what was happening there was, that it actually was meant in a good way. Going back for 1 minute to the translations, I want to say that there's two different descriptions. And Abigail, this is getting to your point in terms of the reason why it's translated. Two different descriptions of the Torah being translated. So there's one that describes it as cheta egel, like it's really almost like a golden calf, and the other one of the 3 days darkness. Before I get to the 3-day darkness, I'm going to talk for 1 second about the golden calf. Why do we describe it like translating the Torah as like a golden calf? Being that the golden calf was supposed to be sort of like another way of worshiping God in a distorted way, but sort of like in our own way. It seems like this was what was happening also with regard to the translation. The minute we translate God's words into what we were saying before, our own interpretation, right? When we translate it, there's always a certain, like Abigail was saying, in terms of there's always some kind of interpretation. You can't just leave it translate with no interpretation. Then it's almost like the golden calf, because you're not leaving, first of all, you're not leaving room for lots of different interpretations, and you're also narrowing down God's words into something, almost physical, because you're taking something that then leaves it to be one direction and not necessarily the way that God meant it. Like the Torah was supposed to be something that was much more enlightening. Okay, it sounds like I have lots of things going on in my house. Okay, this is after a lot of lockdown. It was supposed to be a Tuesday with nobody's gonna be here, but it's okay. Okay. The other, I don't know how much background noise that everybody's hearing from this. Okay.
Don't worry, we all have this. Don't worry, just we hear you very well.
I'm being recorded now. Okay, to find a quieter time next time. Okay. The other thing I wanted to say was the 3-day darkness. Okay, what does 3-day darkness remind us of when we hear 3-day darkness?
Like day 4 was sun, moon, and stars. So maybe creation.
Okay, interesting. 3 days, meaning you're saying it was 3 days before there was even the light, even though there was light on the first day already. What else was there? 3 days of darkness.
One of the plagues.
One of the makot.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Makat choshech, right? We have 3 days of darkness. Makat choshech. That of course Chazal afterwards say that there was a lot more than 3 days, and that expanded into another 3 days after that. But we do have in the Pshat 3 days of darkness in Makat choshech. Okay, I want to say one thing. I know I'm going to run out of time, but I want to say one thing in the parentheses about the way Rashi explains the 3 days of darkness, and just in general, the way Rashi's interpretation of the Torah, and it's so connected. So I just want to mention this. Probably many of you are familiar with Rashi says about the 3 days of darkness that was going on there. 3 days of darkness, for why was there 3 days of darkness? So Rashi mentions 3 things, which is not on this page right now, but everybody could look up Rashi on their own. Rashi says 3 days of darkness was because, for 2 reasons, okay? 2 reasons that are both connected to Am Yisrael. One of them is because afterwards we were supposed to ask all the Egyptians for jewelry and all kinds of, nice clothing to leave Egypt with. We didn't really have anything beforehand. So we had to, during the 3 days of darkness, check around, snoop around a little bit where they're hiding their jewelry, and then come and ask if we could borrow their jewelry, because, we're going to a Chag and we're leaving Egypt, and we wanted to know if we could borrow some jewelry from them. And then if they tell us, I don't have, a diamond necklace, you could be like, oh, I think you have that, in your bottom right drawer next to your bed, you have this diamond necklace with the gold, whatever. Okay, and then we know exactly where it is, and they can't hide it from us. So Rashi says there was 2 reasons, right? That was one of them, and the second reason was because some of Am Yisrael actually did not want to leave Egypt, and the ones that wanted to stay behind and God wanted to punish and to kill beforehand, God didn't want to do that in front of the Mitzrayim and to show that Am Yisrael were also dying. and therefore those 3 days of darkness was when those Jewish people died. According to Rashi, who obviously takes it from Midrashim, but there are other Midrashim also, this had to do with Am Yisrael. The 3 days of darkness had to do with Am Yisrael. I just want to point out, Pesci said that we're supposed to be reading, Shtay Mikra and Had Tirgum, which is true. We're supposed to be reading, every time the Parsha with a translation, but it doesn't have to be an English translation. A lot of people say that today, since a lot of people read Hebrew, the best is to read it with Rashi. And Rashi, in general, in the Torah, just explains how things are done for Am Yisrael. The very, very first Rashi on the Torah is Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Rashi's very famous question is, why are you starting? This is not a history book. Why are you starting with Bereshit bara, right? Why didn't you start with the first mitzvah? This whole book was supposed to be for Am Yisrael to understand the mitzvahs. That's like what it's for, right? It's like Rashi sees this almost as like, someone buys an iPhone and then it gives you instructions to the iPhone. And if you, I don't know, if you buy like a Samsung or something else, and then you try to take the other instructions, like that's not going to work. So this is not a book about history or other things. This is meant for Am Yisrael to do mitzvahs. And therefore, it's supposed to just start with Am Yisrael's mitzvahs. The Chodesh is Elechem, Rosh Chodeshim. Rosh Chodesh is the first mitzvah they got. Start with that. What does Rashi answer? Why does it talk about the creation? Not because creation's interesting, not because we all might be interested in it, because we all want to know where we come from, just so that later on, when Am Yisrael take on Eretz Yisrael, we'll be able to explain to the non-Jews and say the entire land is God's because He created it all, and therefore He can give it out to whoever He wanted, and He promised it to Am Yisrael. And again, the whole creation is talked about here so that we have, just explain that this belongs to Am Yisrael. Of course, it's a very, it's almost an odd Rashi. Like, what does he actually think this is going to work that way, right? I know we could talk to the Palestinians today and just explain to them that God created the world and that He wanted to give us Eretz Yisrael. What's the question? So it doesn't necessarily work that way. A very interesting. Rashi has lots of other places that he does this, right? There's a place where Yaakov Avinu goes to sleep in Luz that he calls afterwards Beit El, and it says Ki ba hashemesh. I could try to just share this. Hold on, I'll show you if I bring. Hold on, I hope I have this somewhere here. Do I have it here? Oh yeah, here we have it. Okay. The pasuk says, "Vayifga b'makom vayalen sham ki ba hashemesh." Okay. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom v'yaseh Moshe ata v'yishkam. Meaning Yaakov Avinu gets to a place. He goes to Haran. In the meantime, the sun went down and he had to go to sleep. Okay. I'm just gonna open Rashi on this for 1 second. Rashi says something so interesting on this pasuk, and I'm in pasuk Yud Aleph. Ki ba hashemesh. Okay, this is where I am. Ba hashemesh means the sun went down and he had to go to sleep. Okay, it was dark. Hayalo lichtov, the Torah should have written vayavo hashemesh instead of saying ki ba hashemesh. Okay, I don't know if to tell you Hebrew if that would be more correct, but that's what Rashi says. Mashma, from this we learn sheshaka'alu hachama pitom shelo ba'onata kedei sheyalin sham. The entire world went to sleep early that night. Okay, people were on their way back from work, or they haven't left work yet. They think they have more time, and the sun goes down suddenly. Why? So that Yaakov Avinu would go to sleep there. Okay, and this is just part of the way Rashi explains in general when the Torah is saying certain things, and Rashi picks up on it and says the sun went down right then and there because God wanted Yaakov to go to sleep there. Ignoring the rest of the world that also needs this sunlight and that thought that they had a little more time for mincha, and all of a sudden, the sun went down and now they don't have time, or whatever it is that they were in the middle of doing. Yaakov Avinu needs the sun to go down. It goes down. We have the last example that I'll give is we have that with Yosef also. Very recently, we had, right, in the parsha about how Yosef, as he's giving so much power to Paro, essentially, everybody sells their land to Paro, and everybody sells everything that they have and everything that they own. Yosef wanted to make sure that people don't feel like very attached to their own land, and therefore he moves everybody around. Okay, according to the Pshat, it's very clear that Yosef is moving everybody around because, you know, one day there won't be any more droughts, and people will have food, and then people will go back to wanting to have the lands of their fathers. And they're all, as long as they're attached to that land and sitting on their own land, it's not going to be easy for them to say, actually, I sold this land to Paro, right? So Yosef does an interesting thing, and he moves everybody around. Everybody in Mitzrayim moves around to somewhere else, and they don't sit on their own lands anymore. So nobody feels like they own their land, because nobody owns their lands anymore. Okay? That's the pshat. Rashi says something so interesting there, and he says the reason why he does it, Yosef does that, was because he was thinking of his brothers. He didn't want the Egyptians to say that his brothers, you know, these parasites, that they came from Israel and then they moved here, and that they came and everybody else is sitting on their lands of their fathers and their forefathers. And the Jews, they came and they're sitting from nowhere. They're not supposed to be here. So he purposely moved everybody around so that everybody would feel like they're all misplaced. Okay? It's just interesting because Rashi focuses on how the Torah was written for the Jewish people. And it was written so that everything we see is basically was for the Jewish people. And therefore, he also sees this choshech to be for the Jewish people. But there are other interpretations of and midrashim that Rashi could have brought in, that other people bring in to see this a little bit differently. And they definitely see about how the Torah maybe, like right after Rumi, the Brodsky is going to talk about it. And the truth of the matter is, I myself am going to talk about something similar on Thursday about Shabbat for Gentiles and for Jews. But it seems like was the Torah also meant for non-Jews? So let me just say that there's I'm going to share this for 1 second. We have in Masechet Sotah, okay? Even before Masechet Sotah, I'll read the psukim first so that it's very clear what it's talking about, okay? In Dvarim Perek Kaf Zayin, okay, we have the psukim that talk about when Am Yisrael are going into Eretz Yisrael. When you guys pass the Jordan, and Hashem gives you this land, okay, set up these large stones and cover them, coat over them with plaster. Pasuk Gimel, while you're passing, write the Torah on these stones. Lema'an asher tavo la'aretz. The word lema'an means in order for you to get to the land that Hashem promised you. Eretz zavat chalav udvash kasher diber Hashem lokeh v'tzechadach. That's the first part. And then when you go over the Jordan, takimu et ha'avanim ha'ele, bring these stones that I told you, asher nochi mitzavet from hayom behar Eival, v'sadotam basid, and put over plaster on them. And banita sham mizbeach laHashem lokecha, and make sure that you make an altar for Hashem, mizbeach avanim, lo tanif alehem barzel. Okay, you can't have any iron over them. Okay, fine. Avanim shlemot tivne et mizbeach Hashem lokecha, balita alav olot laHashem elokecha. Make this altar for the mizbeach laHashem. And on that, v'zavachta shlamim, and bring the korbanot on the altar, v'samachta lifnei Hashem lokecha. And then again, v'katavta al havanim et divrei haTorah hazot be'er heitev. Write on these stones, write the Torah be'er heitev, The English here says most distinctly in a very, very clear manner. Rashi explains, of course, according to Chazal, B'shiv'im lashon, in 70 languages, meaning you're not writing this in Hebrew. Okay, of course, afterwards there's a whole discussion of how could they possibly have written this in 70 languages, no matter how large the stones were. And there's a whole discussion about that, practically how that was. But what's clear is you're writing the Torah down in 70 languages, not for Am Yisrael, for everybody. In Masechet Sotah, there's a discussion both in the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, a little bit different of a discussion. I'm going to run with this so that we have time for it. One is, in the Bavli, it says, Ketzad katvu Yisrael et Torah, right? When they're passing by the Jordan River, how did they write this down? Rav Yehuda says, Al gabei avanim katvu. They write it on the actual stones. Basically, they carved it into the stones. And after that, right, it says you're supposed to put plaster over the stones. It's obviously much easier to write on the plaster, but they actually carved it into the stone itself, and over that they put the plaster. Rabbi Shimon says, Lidvarecha, according to what you say, Rabbi Yehuda, Heyach lamdu umot shel oto hazman Torah. What do you mean? It was so clear to both of them that the whole point of writing the Torah down on these stones was so that everybody could learn Torah. So how are they supposed to learn them and you cover it up with plaster? He answers, Amalo bina yetera natan be'em HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem gave them special understanding. And they sent their special sages, people who could take off this plaster and bring the plaster with them and learn the Torah. But Rabbi Shimon says, Al gabei sid katvuhu. וכתבו להם למטה למען אשר לא ילמדו אתכם לעשות. Okay, on the bottom of it says, the reason why I'm writing this is so that we don't learn from the other nations how to act. We learn it from the actual Torah. Let me just explain for 1 second the Bavli. According to the Bavli, what happened? Okay, there's two different interpretations of what was going on from the Psukim. Either the Torah was definitely written in a way that all the other nations were supposed to learn from this. But it was either engraved in stone, and over the stone was the plaster, and then people actually took the stone was something that was set, meaning something set in stone, right? And the plaster was taken by the different nations so that it could read it, right? Because it's carved into the stone, and they put plaster over it, and they take it with them to their own countries, and that's where they could read it and understand it. Whereas according to Rabbi Shimon, it was the opposite. The plaster was there because it was just easier to write down instead of carving it into the stones. And from there, they could actually read the Torah, okay? Still a little bit difficult to understand here what exactly the argument is about. I want to read for 1 second the Yerushalmi quickly and try to see if we can understand this. The Yerushalmi brings in a little bit of a different explanation, okay? It does say that the Torah was written down in 70 different languages. But then it says like this, Tani alavnei hamalon nichtavu, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda, okay, according to the Yerushalmi. And the Yerushalmi says it was written on the stones of the malon, of the hotel that they were at. Rabbi Yossi omer alavnei hamizbeach nichtavu. They were written on the stones of the mizbeach. Remember, we saw that the Torah, essentially, according to the Psukim, was written down twice. Right? It says it twice in the Psukim. It says, you're going to go past the Jordan. And then it says, literally, while you're moving, as you're walking, you're writing down the Torah here. Okay? As you're walking, you're writing it. And then that is in order for you to enter Eretz Yisrael. Whereas the second time it says, V'katavta al ha'avanim. Okay, the first time it doesn't exactly say avanim. The second time it says you write it down on the actual stones, very clearly, be'er heitev. Okay, it could be that the truth of the matter is the argument that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda are having in the Yerushalmi, and maybe even similar to the argument in the Bavli, is all one argument. Was this on their way? Were these stones that were writing as they were passing down, or once they were in Eretz Yisrael and they made an altar, the entire Torah was written down on the altar. So I know I have 5 minutes, but very briefly, I'm going to ask, basically, what's really going on here, right? When the Gemara brings in a machloket like this, a dispute about if this was written down on stones that were taken with them of Neha Malon, or stones that were the actual altar, it must be that there's something else going on here, right? And this is not like a historical question of where was this actually written down, but where was this supposed to be written down? What was the point of writing it down on the stones on their way, and what was the point of writing it down on the stones on the altar? It seems like there's a difference between the Malon that was very temporary and that they were walking with this. Okay, the actual psukim, as we saw, say that you're supposed to write down the Torah as you're walking in order to enter Eretz Yisrael. You have to have this Torah written down as you're entering Eretz Yisrael in order for you to enter Eretz Yisrael. Be'avrecha, while you're walking, okay, in order le'ma'an, so that you can enter Eretz Yisrael. And the second one is, the second description of writing this down was, Am Yisrael's already entered Eretz Yisrael. They built an altar to Hashem. They've already used this altar. And then on that mizbech, on this altar, is written down the Torah again in a very clear way, in a way that all the other nations are supposed to see. So I want to say, first of all, 2 things that we get out of this, even before I get to this actual dispute and what that meant. But first of all, I want to say is what's very clear from the beginning is when we talk about the Tirgum HaShivim and just, this being a very hard day of getting the Torah translated, and does it matter, who is translated for or in what language? What seems clear is the Torah has been translated for a very, very long time. It's true that there are obvious disadvantages to have the Torah translated, like any translation. But the advantages were kind of better than still that there was more advantages that you can get out of it than disadvantages. So it was translated at the end of the day. It was translated, it was interpreted, it was explained. And even from the very beginning when they were crossing the Jordan, they were going to Eretz Yisrael, God says to write down in 70 different languages the Torah. Not just one language, 70 languages, so that everybody could learn this, so that everybody could see this. It was supposed to be really for everyone. So what are we so upset about here when we're talking about the translation of the Torah and the Tirgum HaShivim? What is getting us so upset is really the question. And it seems like what might be is the question is on what terms? Meaning, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to reach out to everybody and anybody, including all the non-Jews, and say, I want to show you the Torah. I want you to understand this Torah. I want you guys to see the chokhmah, the depth, the beauty of the Torah and mitzvot, and I want you guys to learn from that. Or when we're translating it, what we might be afraid of is that instead of trying to elevate people to that level, giving them first this taste, because you have to start somewhere, not everyone's going to understand Hebrew to begin with. Instead of saying, come and learn from this, we're bringing it down and we're leaving it instead of trying to strive to understand the depth of the Torah, we're bringing it down to what, not just one interpretation, but to instead of uplifting it, we're bringing it down. Like instead of on our terms and saying this is what the Torah is about, it's basically bringing the Torah into an interpretation so that instead of actually trying to understand the Torah, it's trying to bringing your life into the Torah, not the Torah into your life. And then when we talk about the difference between having something engraved in stone and on the other hand brought on the Avnei HaMalon, it seems to be saying that there's 2 aspects of the Torah, right? The Torah that's moving with you, the Torah that you're taking with you into Eretz Yisrael, and the Torah that you're leaving on the altar And the Mizbeach the Beit HaMikdash is supposed to be the place that's supposed to shine for all the non-Jews. So there's something here that's supposed to definitely be shining out. The only problem is the minute you have something translated, and here I heard that there's a famous, governor in America. Afterwards, I saw that it was like fake news, but who said that if God wrote the Bible in English, that was good enough for me, and he was trying to talk about how the English language was good enough. Afterwards, I saw that it was really fake, and he really said that. But the point is that if it was written into Greek, and here's where I think that the Greek and the Hellenistic culture comes in, is instead of trying to uplift the other nations and to show the beauty of the Torah for anybody who wants to understand it, it's doing the opposite. The minute we take it as and interpret it or translate it into Greek, the way Tamai HaMelech wanted to do, it was basically taking the Torah and making it another part of the Greek culture. Unfortunately, I think that's also done today in certain areas, and that's where we talk about the Egel HaZahav, taking the Torah and trying to interpret it in a way that it goes with our modern morals. I'm for modern morals. I also live in this modern world and have morals like we do today. But if we try to sometimes distort the Torah in such a way that it fits in with the way we understand the world without trying to understand the way the Torah is trying to give us morality, then in the end of the day, the translation becomes like the Egel HaZahav. And that's the problem. You're not really understanding the Torah at the end of the day. What you're doing is you're trying to take the Torah in order to explain how the Torah essentially is just like the rest of the Hellenistic culture or anything else that was going on at the time or that's going on today, and taking the Torah to be exactly that, to be part of that culture, instead of doing the opposite, instead of taking it with us as we're going into Eretz Yisrael, liman, in order for us to even go into Eretz Yisrael. And the point of getting to Eretz Yisrael and building the Mikdash was to be all the goyim, so that the Jewish people have one place to be, and that they could shine the light of the Torah and the mitzvahs and the Jewish morality to other nations. But it's cherev pipiot, because it's two sides of the same coin. To try to culturally, when you would translate into other culture, to other languages and other nations, you could be doing one out of two things. Either you could be trying to show the other nations that we're exactly like them, and that the Torah is so much like the other, makes so much sense just like all the other nations. And then essentially what you're doing is turning into Egel HaZahav. You're turning to the golden calf, because you're changing it in such a way that really the translation is almost making it into a different culture. Or what you could try to do is to translate it into 70 different languages, but to explain that this is the center is the Mizbeach, is the Torah, is the Jewish morality, and this is what you're trying to explain to other people, not the opposite. I think that since I have to summarize here, I think that when we're talking about the tragedy or the amazing thing about happening in terms of the translation, it wasn't just about translating. Like we saw, there was translating before, there was translating after. We all need a translation. I personally am a Gemara teacher, and I'm not against translations. I definitely think that when people first learn Gemara, they should always realize that the translation is a certain interpretation, to go back and try to understand the original words in order to then realize, wait a minute, maybe we could have understood this a little bit differently. That's super important. I think Steinsaltz does that in an amazing way, because he gives literal translations, and when you actually see the literal words, you can go back and say, wait a minute, maybe I was taking one interpretation, even Rashi's interpretation, and I wasn't necessarily trying to think out of that and explain it a little bit differently. And that's true with the Torah's words also. When we go back to the original words, there's no tachli for that, meaning going back to the original words and seeing what was really written, we could always explain in different ways. But we need that aid sometimes to open it up to us, to even not, be scared to open up the books for the first time, to try to understand it. We really do need that aid of translating. And it was so clear that the first time when Am Yisrael were going past the Jordan, they were taking this with us, and they were writing down the Torah in 70 different languages. It was translated, it was explained. It was out there for everybody, but it was out there for everybody to try to understand the Torah, not for us to try to bring the Torah into, you know, modern culture and see how that fits in with everything else. Questions or comments?
I don't have a, thank you, Navit. I don't have any question, but I have a comment. Maybe it was very interesting, the conclusion you made about the translation. It's not one of translation, but like a bringing the Torah up or down, like to the people. And it made me think about, you know, like we're in Prague. My husband is a rabbi here, so he learned in Israel many years, and he wanted to learn more actually, but like they told him, you know, like you are coming to be rabbi in Prague, like you can learn only 2 years in Israel and it's enough for here, like we are very, you know, low. And he was like, no, like I don't want to be like you, like I mean, I don't want to teach what you already know. I need to learn more and more. It's not because like people don't know that I also have to say like Dvar Torah, which are like very low. So he kept like learning, and then after 13 years, they told him, okay, you have to come. But like, it's the same idea. It's like, well, do I have to, like, where is, we have to elevate ourselves, even if.
Exactly. The point exactly is what we're talking about, the difference between trying to elevate ourselves into the Torah life and understanding in that way, or trying to bring it down. And I think the tragedy that Chazal was talking about when it comes to the Tirgum HaShiv'im was really bringing the Torah down, was really bringing it into the Hellenistic culture and trying to say, let's see how this fits into the rest of course, there's like all these different, you know, historical ways of explaining how Talmud had this huge library, much bigger than the one I have here. And he just didn't have, you know, the Bible in his library. He wanted the translation to fit into that, meaning he was trying to take the Torah and put it as the rest of his library. He had this big library. He had the culture behind him, and that's what he had with him. And what he wanted to do was essentially take the Torah into that and not try to really understand, you know, Torah Moshe, meaning he wasn't really trying to come and understand the Torah as it was.
I think there's also a very big difference when they did the translation of the, you know, 72. They did that. They like took the Torah, they translated to Greek, they sent it all over the place. Here, with the stone, that's where the Mizbeach is, you're not actually seeing the translation until you actually go to the Mizbeach to, you know, it's different.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think there's exactly that question of the being on the Mizbeach that was stuck there, and those who took the plaster with them and took it to their country. And I think that there's a little bit of the question there in the Yerushalmi of what exactly was done, but it is trying to make the point that you're making of, you know, how to incorporate the Torah, you know, and what, but I still think it still means on those terms. Tzipora is reminding me now that I really have to stop because everybody has another session that has to go into that. So I just want to say that I really enjoyed. So thank you. Anybody who wants to be in touch with me further, I'm gonna just chat my email, and just in terms of anything, doesn't have to just be about this shiur, about just our general Beit Midrash or questions for other teachers or anything. Just feel free to be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Everyone has the link for the next sessions, 2 other sessions.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
will see you there. Bye.
Thank you. See you there, everyone.